Hello, my name is Steve Weezy with NASCO Incorporated, and today we're going to go through some of the use and care aspects of rider scrubbers. Specifically today we're going to go through the advanced Advenger rider scrubber. One of the first things we like to always cover is the issue with batteries. Batteries are typically the root problem of most issues that go wrong with scrubbers, and a lot of it has to do with how people maintain the batteries. The batteries, the deep cycle batteries, the flooded deep cycle batteries, typically need to be charged after they've been run down at least 50%. So you're going to look at your battery condition meter, and if you're only using the machine for an hour, hour and a half a day, don't charge the batteries up. If you're going to need to run the batteries down more than half each time you use it, you're going to charge it every day. But typically don't charge it every day unless you're running your batteries past half. When it comes time for maintaining the batteries, what we need to do is make sure the machine is off. We want to disconnect the batteries from the machine. Anytime you're working with batteries, you like to have your protective equipment on, which is going to be gloves, it's going to be goggles, because you're working with battery acid and electrolytes, and those are very corrosive. You don't want to get it in your eyes. So when you're looking at the batteries, it's a little hard to get the camera angle in on where the water level should be. But basically, when we look inside the cell of a battery, what we're going to see are plates. We want to make sure that the plates are always covered with water. So you have the top of the collar that runs down to the plates. Just cover the plates by about an inch. Don't run the water levels up into the top of the collar, because what's going to happen then, as you charge, the batteries are going to vent out of these caps, and if you have the batteries overwatered, you're going to find out that you have a lot of water on top of the batteries, and it's going to cause the terminals to corrode. If you don't have enough water in the batteries, then the plates are exposed, and when you charge the batteries, it's going to superheat them, and that's going to damage the batteries almost immediately. So it's worst case scenario is charging batteries when the plates are exposed. It's not nearly as bad as if you're charging batteries when you have too much water in. Long and short of it is, just cover the plates by about an inch. A handy little item for watering batteries is a battery water filler. Basically what you're doing is just putting distilled water in here, and you bring this up to the battery, and all you have to do is press it into the cell, and it's going to release the water and automatically stop when it gets to the right level. When you hear it stop gurgling, then you know that battery cell is full. You take it off, you go to the next cell. The batteries are going to have 3 cells each, and depending upon what model you have, you may have 4 batteries, you may have 6 batteries. The bottom line is that you have to add water to every cell of the battery. The cells are not connected. So you want to make sure that you water all of the cells of the battery. And on the Advengers, it gets to be a little difficult to water the back cells in these batteries. So what you may have to do to get at these back cells is take off the rear tank. And to take off the rear tank, it's fairly simple, and I'll show you how that gets done. Okay, here's how you remove the rear tank on the Advenger. There's going to be one electrical connection, and that's going to the vac motor. Pull that apart. Usually it comes out a little easier than that. Disconnect your squeegee hose in the back. And I like to open the rear tank. The tank will just lift right off the back of the machine. Now you can access all the batteries. It's easy to get at everything. And again, with the batteries are just like the machine. If you see corrosion, if you see water on top of the batteries, make sure you wipe that off. And in this case, we like to use just paper towels to wipe off the top of the batteries. But keep everything dry and clean. If you are watering the batteries, you want to water the batteries after you charge them, not before. The only time that you would charge them before, you would water them before you charge the batteries, is if the plates are exposed. You never want to charge batteries with exposed plates. So if the plates are exposed before you go to use the machine or before you charge the machine, make sure you cover those with water. Otherwise, typically you're always going to add water after you get done charging the batteries. For removing these caps, they are the quick release, so you're going to get all 3 caps at one time, and they'll pull off. Typically your older batteries or most of the other models are going to have individual celled caps. Replacing it, Just set it in and twist, and you're done. Okay, replacing the tank is just basically the reverse of how we took it off. Lift it up, set it on. After you get done reinstalling the tank, don't forget to reconnect your vacuum system. I also want to point out that you don't always have to take off the tank to check the water level in the batteries. You can also use a funnel. Some people use a toilet inspection light that has a little light and a mirror on it, and you can check the water level of the batteries. So if you can water the batteries without taking the tanks off, that's just fine. We just do it sometimes for convenience. In some of the older models, it's a little bit more difficult to get at the batteries than it is on this one. So now we have our vacuum system hooked back up, the tank is back on the machine, and now we just have to hook up our battery pack. Remember, when we do charge the batteries, we're always charging the batteries. Some people, sometimes, inadvertently charge the control counter and they plug the charger in. That charger will fit on that plug, but obviously you're not going to be charging the batteries. So you always want to make sure you charge the batteries, not the machine. And plug that in, and you're ready for operation. Basically all scrubbers do the same thing. They put water down, they scrub it, and they pick it up. So the issues start becoming, if you're not putting water down, why isn't water going down? If it's not scrubbing correctly, why isn't it scrubbing correctly? And if you're not picking up, what's wrong with the recovery system? So typically, if you're not putting water down on a scrubber, there's really only a few things that are going to be wrong with it, and in this case typically only one, and that's going to drill in on this little solution filter right here. Your solution filter kind of controls the water that goes through the solenoid of the machine, and if that gets clogged up, it can't allow the water through. So what you're going to need to do is periodically maintain that filter. Maintaining the solution filter is easy. There's going to be a valve underneath that's hard to see, but usually it's got a red knob. You're going to close that valve, and now you can remove this poly bubble. You're going to get a little bit of water, but because you have the valve closed, you're not going to get much. And you can see in here that there's a lot of debris in that filter. I don't know if you can notice that with the picture, but it's all floating on top. And that's what's being stopped by that filter, so it doesn't allow it to go through the solenoid. So to clean this filter, all you have to do is pull out the screen, dump this out, and you can see there's a lot of debris in there. So what you want to do is just get rid of all the debris. Right? Okay. So remove the screen, make sure it's clean, doesn't have any debris in it, and you can see all the debris that was inside this filter. And that happens to be because this is a brand new machine, so there's a lot of poly shavings that came out of the tank. But just make sure that this is clean, make sure this is clean, set that back in. And when you screw this in, make sure you don't over tighten it. It's hand tightened, and just give it a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a cinch, and it does not have to be over tightened. If you over tighten it, what's going to happen is you're going to crack that plastic bulb and it's going to leak. And then when you're done, turn the valve back on. That's going to allow the water flow through the unit. So we went through the solution system, everything's working fine, it's clean. Now we want to focus on the scrub deck and make sure everything's working down there. So what we're going to do is take off our side skirts. These side skirts are actually squeegees that channel the water back between the wheels and into the center of the squeegee. These have to be working well also in order for the machine to pick up correctly. So these side skirts have to be in good shape for everything to work well. They channel the water back to the middle of the regular squeegee. And you're going to notice there's two on here, and typically the one that's doing most of the squeegeeing is going to be this back one. What we want to do is keep these things clean and keep them in good shape. So when you're done using the machine, you always want to make sure that you wipe these things off, and all you need is a wet rag. You don't need any cleaner. But you also notice that you could take this strip out and use the top edge of these blades, so you can use both sides. The way that these side skirts are adjusted is with these yellow adjuster knobs. When you're using the machine, This side skirt assembly sits on top of the yellow adjuster knobs, and you cinch that down with the two locking nuts. Don't over tighten these. They don't have to be that tight, because that'll compress the side skirt between the yellow adjusting knob, and you're set. If you need to make adjustments to this, take off the side skirt, adjust these up or down depending upon what you need to do, and then let it set. You should get a fairly even fan when you're running the machine. When you're making turns, that fan is going to buckle underneath. That's standard operating procedure on these, so don't worry about that. But when you're running the machine in a straight line, you should get a nice even fan like that all the way through. While we're under here, we also see that we have a solution drain hose. Depending upon the detergent you're using, periodically you like to drain this out and flush the tanks out. I like to use a mild acid cleaner to clean the tanks out once in a while. What that's going to do is help dissolve some of the neutral detergent that's actually getting into the systems. And then when you're done with that, just set that back up underneath. Taking brushes or pad holders on and off the machine periodically is always a good idea. Okay, we went through the solution system, that's working. We went through the scrub deck, we made sure the side skirts were adjusted correctly. Now we're going through the recovery system. Recovery system is going to consist of your squeegee, your recovery tank. We want to make sure that everything's operating. What you need to do is make sure that your gasket is in place. A lot of times you see these and the gasket's torn or ripped. You might have a gap in the gasket. That's going to mean that it's sucking air through areas other than the back squeegee, and you're not going to get as good a suction as you'd like. You also have a filter for the vacuum. This needs to be in good shape. You can just rinse that out, dry it, put it right back in. If that gets clogged, you're not going to be drawing as much air as you'd like to get. The newer models have a debris catch. This just pulls out, and you can rinse that out. That's going to catch any debris that came up, and this way it doesn't drop into the tank and go down the drain when you're emptying the machine. Just clean that out, set that back in. You're going to cut a little bit. Getting down to the recovery system, the most important part is obviously the squeegee. When you look at a squeegee on a machine, and it's being used, you should get a nice even fan all the way across the bottom. That means when it's being used, you get a nice even bend all the way across the squeegee. If the squeegee is leaving a big streak down the middle, typically that means that it's pitched forward too far. If your squeegee is leaving two streaks down the side, it means it's pitched back too far. On this machine, it's a simple little adjustment with this knob. On some of the older machines, the knob is going to be located way underneath. There's going to be a lock nut on it, and you'll see a black knob. You need to loosen up the lock nut, rotate the black knob, you'll get a pitch out of the squeegee, then reset that lock nut. You'll also notice that all of the squeegees have reversible blades. So as this blade gets worn down, you can pop off the turnbuckle, pull off the strap, pull out the blade, turn it upside down, put it back in, set down your turnbuckle again, and use the top of the blade. The best time to change these blades is before they get through half of the edge of the blade here. You're going to find out that these blades are going to wear at the tips first. So what you want to do is just keep an eye on this edge and make sure that the edge of the blade, once it gets to the 50% point, then you flip it and use the back side of this blade. And once that gets worn thin, then you flip it over to the top edge of the blade and use the other two sides. Okay, setting it back on the machine for use. Tighten these up. Don't over tighten them. If you're getting to the point where you have to tighten them so hard they're hard to get off, chances are you've probably worn off the edging of those adjusting nuts. Time to buy some new ones. Reinstall, and we're ready for use. Alright, when you're done using this machine, or any auto scrubber for that matter, what you need to do obviously is empty the recovery tank. You never want to use the machine and leave the recovery tank full of dirty water. A couple of things that happens is, obviously, if I have a sealed tank full of dirty water, that's going to create bacteria. A lot of times when you fire up a wet vac or you fire up a machine and it smells real musty, what you're smelling is that bacteria being broadcast up in the air. You don't want to breathe that. So a way to eliminate that is by always emptying your recovery tank after every use. Keep that dome open so the tank can breathe, and rinse out the inside of the tank. So when you're done using this machine, you always rinse out the tank, drop that in the sewer or wherever you're going to drain it, rinse out the inside of the tank, let that run through, keep this open, and let it, and park it just like that. Always take off the squeegee after every use. Disconnect it from the recovery hose. Take a wet rag, wipe down the inside of the blades, so that's going to remove any debris. You don't want it to stick to the squeegee, because next time you use the machine, if you don't wipe off the recovery blade, you're going to have debris stuck to it that's hardened, and that's where you're going to get some streaks. So always wipe this out. Make sure the channel's clear. Make sure there's nothing stuck inside the channel. This should be nice and clean. On this particular machine, the newer versions, we can actually hang it right on the back of the tank, and that keeps it open and you can transport it. But that's the way to keep it. If you don't have the newer machine and you can't hang it up on the top, again, keep that open. You can reattach your squeegee for use. Just tighten them down. Now the next person that's going to use the machine is going to have a nice, clean, streak-free squeegee. Okay, we're done cleaning off the recovery system. Now we want to clean off the side skirts, because remember, those act as squeegees also. Just loosen them up, take them off. All you have to do with these is just wipe them down with a rag. Okay, after you've wiped these off, at this point you can take your brushes or pads off the machine, inspect them, make sure nothing's caught up in the brush or the pad. If you need to replace the pads or flip the pads, now's the time to do it. Take care of that, and then when you're done cleaning and flipping, lock them back on the machine for the next user, put the side skirt back on for the next user, and it's ready to go. What I also like to do when I'm done using the machine is just wipe it down. Sometimes you get some overspray from the recovery tank. It's always nice just to wipe down the top of the decks. Just takes a couple of minutes. Just walk around the machine. Kind of treat the machine like it's your car. Wipe off the areas that need to be wiped off, and the machine will stay looking nice and pretty for many years to come.